So I just launched my boat on a new body of water that I've never been to, and I want to just take you guys through the steps of what I would do when I come to a new body of water for the first time, just kind of my approach of the best way to tackle it, the best, the things to look for, the whole process I go through to try to have the best experience out there on the water and catch the most and biggest fish. So first thing you do when you come to a body of water is you want to do a little bit of homework, all that. Obviously I've looked on Google Maps, I've looked at the Navionics app just to kind of study and see what's here. Now that I've gotten here, just looking at it, I don't know the actual acreage or size of it. This lake's not real big, it's not a big massive reservoir, but I like little lakes like this because less areas for me to cover and figure them out. I'm going to guess just looking at it, it's probably a couple thousand acres. And it's got a good diversity. We've got our deep, clear water down here by the dam, and I can see at least 2 major fingers that go off of it with some smaller coves and all that. Once we pulled up to the lake here, I want to put a visual on here and just kind of see what water clarity looks like. I can see a lot of shoreline vegetation, and then once we launch the boat, there's some kind of submergent vegetation under the water as well. So it's just showing me the different options right off the bat that I'll be able to fish. I can see a dam here. Dams are always good, steep rocky banks. I see some buoys out here that I believe are like fish attractors. So that right there just shows me visually what I can see from the ramp. From there, I always want to go for a boat ride, and regardless if the lake is a couple thousand acres like this or 100,000 acres, but I want to go for a boat ride and see what that lake has to offer. We're going to go and we're going to look at things visually. I kind of see on the map, I see there's some points and all that, but I need to lay my eyes on them and also let the GARMIN show me what's underneath the water as well. So let's go for a boat ride. So we see this fish attractor here, which means there's probably some kind of man-made structure here. So we're gonna just idle by this and see what it has to offer. And I see right here, it's some form of a rock pile. You can clearly see that. I can see it on the sonar. You can see maybe there's some trees here. These are definite fish off to the side of this thing, but that's pretty interesting. You have this amazing structure there, but the fish are holding off to the side of it. Here's something that's pretty interesting too, is I'm seeing right at 18 feet, if you can see that color difference, that's probably a thermocline right at about 18 feet. What that thermocline is, it's where, remember when you stick your foot down and the water temperature changes is? When you get a thermocline that sets up really hard like that, usually the water below the thermocline means there's no oxygen there. So your fish can't go deeper than that thermocline. So I know right then and there, when it comes to fishing on this lake, I probably don't want to fish much deeper than 18 feet. The fish are going to typically be shallower than that. So that helps out. I can see it here on my traditional sonar as well. You can see how the fish are sitting right above. You can see that right there. That's a really good picture of that, how the fish are sitting right above that thermocline. But that's really a good example. You can see the interference, and what that is, it's a difference in water temperature. See, look at that perfect little grass edge right there. We've come up on this point, and now we're starting to get into this submergent vegetation. So I can tell right there, when we get into about 7-8 foot of water, we're starting to get into the submergent vegetation. And that's an important thing to remember, is bass are an edge species. So these fish are really going to relate to that outside edge of that grass. So what I'm going to do, just to mark this, to make it easier for me to come back and fish, as soon as we get out here, we're going to hit an edge when we get to a certain depth. And I'm going to save a waypoint so I know where that edge is, so it makes it easier. See how the fish are relating to the edge? You can clearly see them. You got grass, 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 boom, right to the edge. The fish are relating to that edge. I'm not saying those are bass. They could be bluegill, they could be crappie or anything like that, but guess what? Where there's bluegill or shad or crappie, there's probably bass not far away either. So as I'm kind of idling around this lake, and I notice back in here there tends to be a little more variation with some flats and all that. Let's actually go back here and look at this. I see the contours here make a unique little underwater point, so we're going to go back there and check that out. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes I think a lot of new anglers do, is they want to get to fishing too soon. Be patient. Get out here and do your homework. Look around, use your electronics because then you're going to have a better feel for the fishery when you actually do start fishing. So even if I just idle around and start saving waypoints on stuff that looks good, that gives me some targets to come back to and fish at a different time. Definitely a harder bottom right there. Might be an old road. And there's a tree. Wow, look at that. How cool is that? Holy cow, look at that. Guess what these are, guys? See how it looks like a golf ball? Those are actually bluegill beds. And you can see the bluegill beds, but if you look closely, you can see those white dots. Those are probably bluegill in those bluegill beds. So this is definitely a likely spot you'd want to make a few casts. I can push this waypoint spot, and now I've made a waypoint there on that particular spot. And you can see right here where that showed up on the graph. There's that waypoint. So that spot is marked. That we need to fish. This is a point that comes out here. If you look over here on my map, I've saved a couple waypoints as we went over this thing. So it's a point there, be a great place to fish. I guarantee you there's some fish holding on that thing, but these are rocks that are casting shadows. That's why you're seeing the dark. The light is probably the top of this rock hump here. And by being able to save a waypoint right on top of that, I know exactly where it is. I can go right back to it and fish right on top of that rock bar there. So okay, we're exploring this lake. We've been riding around for a few minutes. We've visually looked at everything. You know, it's a pretty easy lake to look at visually. I see that I've got some shoreline vegetation. We call it water willows. There's some other stuff out from it that is pond weed. So the vegetation, that shallow vegetation, has some potential to hold some fish. But then out here a little bit deeper, we have some emergent vegetation that I'm curious to fish and try. But as we've also been idling around visually looking at things, we've also been looking at the GARMIN, and what I'm doing is I'm going along and we're finding rock piles, brush piles and all that, and every time I see something like that, just like here, I'm creating a waypoint. So I'm able to save that. That looks like some kind of hump. I can save a waypoint on that. I know when I go back to those icons that those are spots worth fishing or looking at again. So here I've ran around, idled around. I've broke down this lake a lot just by visually looking at stuff and idling, that when I come across one of these little icons, I need to be sure to fish it, you know, for maybe some deeper fish. But if I want to get up and fish the vegetation that's here, I can get up and fish the vegetation as well. Oh, shad. Where is there some shad at in this lake? So on a new lake, I'm visually looking for things. I'm seeing some beautiful lay down trees here. Those definitely have potential to hold some fish, but I'm also looking for bait. And you know, you're always looking, trying to find bait. And like right here, we came over a spot where you can see some fish out here, but I'm actually seeing some bait. Here's some bait here. I hadn't seen bait earlier, so that right there would give me more confidence to want to fish this arm of the lake versus the other arm of the lake. There's something I'm seeing right there that gives me a visual too about bait. I'm seeing birds, I'm seeing herons. While that other side of the lake looks the same, from my eyes, my GARMINs are telling me something different. I'm seeing bait over here. So that's why it's so important when you're looking at a new body of water, you want to look at everything. So while that arm of the lake looks just as good as this lake visually from my eyes, it's good to get over here and look at your electronics as well. I'm noticing a more defined creek channel over here, which creates a better edge. But the key thing we're seeing over here is we're seeing bait. I can see schools of shad on my GARMIN. We're seeing some herons over here on this side. We didn't see those over there. So that right there tells me there's bait over here, or more bait over here, which means we're probably going to have a better population of bass over here as well. So last but not least, when you're coming to a new lake, and if you're just trying to figure out where to get started, where to fish, the best thing I can tell you, every lake has them, are fishing points. There are always fish on points. Fish use points as a travel route. They use them to come to go to spawn, and they use points to move back out after post spawn. They move at them in the fall, so points always hold fish. So if all else fails, go fish a point, and then you can pick apart the cover that might be on it. So, you know, those are the things to remember. Remember, when you get to a lake, visually inspect it. Look over maps, look all that. Get there, lay your eyes on it, and go for a boat ride. Visually inspect everything there and see what you can see with your eyes that that give you confidence, you know, the different types of cover, the structure, all that. Then at the same time, be looking on your electronics. Trust your electronics. Use your map, use your sonar, your clear view and your side view, because you're going to see some things along the way that that you might not have seen visually that will also produce fish. While you're doing both of those, you want to save waypoints on your GPS, and those are good starting points. You might see a rock pile like we saw on your side view. Save it. It gives you a spot to come back and fish, but then you might see something up on the shore like a good looking lay down tree, a dock, or something like that. But remember, look for bait, look for birds, look for the things that stand out. You know, we had two coves or two arms of this lake that looked very much the same side by side, but then when you get through and you graph them and you start visually looking, on the one arm we saw way more bait fish, saw a lot of shad, and we also saw birds, which we didn't see on the other side. That was another sign to tell me to fish that area. And then remember, the whole key is look for those key places that hold fish. Look for the points, grass edges, weed edges, drop-offs, ledges, all those things. Edges are what hold fish. Then get out and go have fun, catch a lot of fish.